and folks will filter in as they're able. Yeah, so a little background about the Professional Opportunities and Adaptation Member-led Interest Group, which is hosting and convening the session along with the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. We are a member-led interest group that works with all ASAP members who are at a transition point in their careers, whether they're underemployed, unemployed, graduating, retiring, to figure out the tools, skills, competencies that they need to get that next opportunity. And today we're really excited to be joined by 4 speakers who will be speaking on their experiences of working in environmental justice, whether it's energy, youth-based work, rural or urban-based environmental justice, at the nexus of climate adaptation, and yeah, everything that they have learned on their journey. And I'm very excited to hear what they have to say. And I think without further ado, we can get into it. Also, this meeting is going to begin with about 20 minutes of introductions from 5-minute introductions from each of the panelists. And then we're going to do a large group Q&A. Would someone mind dropping the Slido information in the chat? And yes. Cool, thank you, Isaac. Throughout the speaker introductions, you can drop any questions you might have in the Slido, and then also upvote questions that you want to bump and you want to hear from. And then we'll move into a 10-minute large group Q&A to hear from all the speakers. And then at the end, for 20 minutes, we will move into 4 different breakout rooms for some smaller discussions with each speaker. And yeah, that'll be it. So without further ado, would love to hear an introduction from one of the speakers. So would Natalia or Nancy like to go first?
I'm happy to kick it off. If that's okay, Nancy. Sure. Oh, okay, cool. So hi, everyone. Good afternoon now. Happy to join. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Natalia Brown. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the current Climate Justice Program Manager at Catalyst Miami. More broadly, we're an economic justice organization, and we work to identify and collectively address issues that adversely impact low-wealth communities and communities of color all throughout Miami-Dade County. And in my position, I also do some quite a bit of state level and regional work as well, because of course, you know, our little county doesn't exist in a bubble. But I'm happy to be here today. I know that, you know, being in a transitioning or growing phase in your career can be tricky. So I think this space is really valuable, and hopefully I can also provide a little bit of insight on what my journey was like. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Miami, and actually just joined Catalyst Miami this June, and have transitioned from working on a very wonky and technical science side of biochemistry to a complete shift into like more civil and environmental engineering, then into like the technicalities of energy policy from more of a legal perspective, and then found my way to environmental justice through social science and participatory action research. So have had quite a bit of transition myself, and just now starting this position in the nonprofit world. So happy to speak to some of those things, as well as kind of the unique complexities of climate justice and climate adaptation in a coastal community. Miami-Dade is often referred to as, you know, ground zero when it comes to a lot of the climate-related impacts that we see in coastal communities, from sea level rise to climate gentrification, to, you know, things more related to our topography, our legacies of systemic racism that are historic but ongoing in the way that we see communities' ability to respond to things like severe and increasing extreme heat, or you know, severe storms and extreme weather, or flooding on sunny days and after mass precipitation events. So all of those types of things are in my realm now, and in my role, I'm really fortunate at Catalyst in that my work is very dynamic. I manage a lot of different research partnerships, relationships with public officials, collaborations with county, municipal, and state legislators and staff in different agencies and different departments, doing work related to climate and health and housing. I also facilitate a couple of working groups that include, academic institutions and community members and professionals from a lot of different perspectives that are working on different projects to address the way that climate change impacts our lives. And ultimately also, leading campaigns through grassroots organizing in connection with community members and residents here in Miami-Dade County to ensure that everything that we're doing as an organization, because Catalyst Miami, like I said, more broadly, we do things to address economic justice in different ways that may not be exclusively, climate adaptation or climate work, but all of that community economic development, all of that policy and advocacy that we do does inevitably overlap with the climate work. And so my role is just ensuring that everything that we're doing in response to climate change is not only building the resilience of our communities, but it's also protecting them from harm, and is doing so in a way that's creating opportunities for them to benefit from and ultimately thrive in the way that we're responding to climate change by creating new opportunities. So that's my intro. And I will pass it back on to the next person.
Great, thank you, Natalia. It was really inspiring to hear you speak on, not just like being reactive to climate resilience issues, but also creating economic opportunities in the face of everything that's going on in Miami-Dade County. Great, so next, Nancy, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure, and be sure and tell me if my volume gets too low, okay?
Yes.
Well, hi everybody from snowy northern Idaho. We just got our first 6 inches of snow. My name is Nacy Gilliam, and I am the director of the Model Forest Policy Program. That's an organization that I started about 20 years ago when I lived back east in Virginia because I was worried about the loss of forests due to industrial forestry. So let's see a little bit about my career. I was an Outward Bound instructor, turned into a psychologist, and then turned enviro. For the longest time, I thought, well, what do all those things have to do with each other? And they've ended up career-wise being a really nice combination of skills. My background was group facilitation, and that's come in real handy, working at a local level with both rural communities and tribes. As executive director, my day-to-day job is chief cook and bottle washer. I make sure the organizational components are running smoothly. I manage staff. I oversee fundraising. I lead strategic planning. I'm the connector to the board. So our work in about 2007, due to the request of the Merck Family Fund, shifted from forest policy over to what's the relationship to forest and climate. So our work now has been help primarily rural communities and tribes go through our Climate Solutions University, which you can see online. And it's a year-long training program where we train local facilitators to create an adaptation plan. And we also help them implement that plan. I think I'm here today because rural communities, and I'm sure you're aware of tribes, have very special needs as opposed to urban
Nancy,
areas.
I have to stop you. It's hard to hear you.
Okay.
I'm sorry. If you could just like speak right up to the mic. You're talking about some really great things. Thank you.
Don't know where. I'll go backwards for a second. So our work is primarily rural and tribal. And I'm here today to talk about, I guess, our experiences and our challenges for those subpopulations in this country, because they're very different than working urban. So I'd be happy to talk about what are the rural and tribal challenges, and what are the skill sets needed that I think are unique for working with those populations. Hope you can hear that.
Great, thanks so much, Nancy. That's really interesting to hear about that transition that your organization went through from like just forestry policy into like capacity building with communities and yeah, Native nations and rural communities. Thank you. So also, if anybody's having trouble hearing anyone, also welcome folks to just like turn up the volume on their end. That sometimes can be very helpful. So would Latia or Sumi like to introduce themselves next?
Yeah, I can go. Hi, everyone. My name is Latia Leonard. I currently serve as the co-director of the Youth Energy Squad at EcoWorks. We're based in Detroit, Michigan. So the Youth Energy Squad, we're a program that's about 12 to 13 years old. Now we're almost 13. And we focus on, educating young people on environmental justice and place-based education with our largest partner, Detroit Public Schools. As part of our program, I help oversee and run our AmeriCorps program, because that's what we are. We're an AmeriCorps program. And we have our service members go out to schools where we talk to young people about various different environmental issues related to energy sustainability, water conservation, recycling, air quality, and economic justice. So I do have that leadership of like, if you're interested in like learning about nonprofit leadership and things of that nature, or management or whatever, I definitely have that. Before coming to EcoWorks, I also had an opportunity to serve in a variety of other leadership roles, which has included serving on the Equity and Advisory Committee for the Healing Our Waters Coalition, as well as serving on the Air Quality Council for the Environmental Justice Coalition. However, a lot of my experience has evolved around community organizing in building around water and youth development. One of the few projects that I've had an opportunity to work on is I had a really great opportunity to work on the ground in various different places all over Michigan, which has included Flint. I'm sure everybody on this call is familiar with the Flint water crisis. I've had a chance to do some community building in Flint, working with organizations on the ground there as well, and helped piloted a youth water testing program, which ultimately led to the opening of a youth community water lab in Flint. So that was one thing that I had got a chance to do, just helping to work on community-based projects and coalition building around on the ground issues, as well as getting to work a couple other places on water issues, particularly like in Benton Harbor and Highland Park. So I'm really knowledgeable about water issues, but most importantly, citizen science and how you can engage in citizen science, whether it be through advocacy or just at community level work, and how it can build to systemic change within communities. So that's a little bit about me, and look forward to talking to everyone.
Wow, thank you so much for that introduction. You're right. It's so, I don't know, important to think about those opportunities for citizen science, especially citizen science that's like run by like younger people to, yeah, work on these other issues that everybody is facing, no matter their age. Okay, so last but not least, I'd love to hear from Sumi about yourself and your work.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to virtually meet all of you. My name is Sumi Selvaraj. I'm the Environmental Justice Manager at the California Coastal Commission. We are a state agency in California, and we're a coastal management program that oversees land use and development along the California coastline in an area called the Coastal Zone. And we regulate development in this area. So our agency issues permits for applicants, like that could be private developers, local governments, and we also work with local governments to develop coastal land use planning documents. And in my role as the environmental justice manager, I oversee implementation of our environmental justice policy, which our commission adopted in 2019. And that was in part because of a change to our law that gives the commission its statutory authority, the Coastal Act, where our commissioners, we have 12 commissioners that are our decision-making body, where they now have the authority to consider environmental justice when acting on permit decisions. So it's a really big and exciting change for the agency. And it's something that when I came to the commission, I actually started at the Coastal Commission as a NOAA Coastal Management Fellow, which if any of you are finishing graduate school or just completed it, the NOAA Coastal Management Fellowship will be accepting applications this winter for potential fellows for next year. And we actually will be hosting a fellow, so a kind plug out there for that. But I didn't know the Coastal Commission was considering environmental justice at the time. It was in 2016, and that was when the Coastal Act was amended. So when I interviewed for the position, I knew coming out of graduate school, I got my master's in geography at the University of South Carolina with a focus on environmental planning. And I'm more of a social scientist myself. I did a lot of community engaged research and work in undergrad and throughout. And I did AmeriCorps after college. Public service and working in communities is just very important and central to what I do. And I didn't realize the project that they had posted was really focused on sea level rise. And my work in graduate school, I looked at how people who take public transit in Charleston, South Carolina, mostly riders of color, people who don't have access to cars, how they're vulnerable to sea level rise and how they're affected by coastal flooding. So it was really central to me to think about equity and adaptation when I was leaving graduate school and trying to find a career. And I just remember bringing that to my presentation. And when I interviewed with the commission, they actually said, well, we're looking for someone who would be interested in environmental justice. It wasn't in the application, it wasn't in the description, but it was something that I brought and shared with in my interview. And it's something that I just kind of have always tried to remind folks of going through the process. Sometimes opportunities, especially depending on where you are in the country, they might not explicitly state environmental justice or climate justice in them, but it doesn't mean that we can't bring it to our jobs. And at the commission, one thing that is really central to our work, there's a couple of different things that we're doing. We're having internal facing work where we're looking at racial equity in our own agency, how we're addressing it through our internal operations and hiring and recruitment and retention, because we recognize that the environmental field itself is not very diverse and has often been a field that hasn't necessarily been as welcoming for people from all backgrounds. And then also recognizing that having a diverse staff is critical to our agency's mission of achieving environmental justice and creating a coastline that's for people of all races, incomes, and backgrounds in California. And so in our environmental justice implementation, that's through our work in the regulatory side. We're looking at how are we addressing impacts to communities that are going to be bearing the negative impacts of any coastal development. Is it being addressed through the permitting process? Are we including findings? Are there appropriate mitigations in the permit conditions, or are we able to include it in zoning and planning changes? So there's also a big focus on how are we addressing this through our permitting and planning work. So happy to answer more questions. That's a broad overview of a lot of different things, and I'm looking forward to chatting with all of you.
Great, thank you so much, Sumi. Yeah, I think it's really exciting to hear your perspective, especially as somebody who's trying to further environmental justice work inside of an organization or agency that maybe didn't have that as a priority or something they really had front end, which I hope a lot of the people on this call are taking notes about how they can further equity and just outcomes no matter what your role is. So I think at this time, I would say thank you so much. So exciting to hear a little bit more about what each of the speakers are up to. More information about everybody was dropped in the chat by Isaac. Thank you, Isaac. And now I think we will transition into a quick 10-minute Q&A. So once again, you can ask your questions on Slido with this code that I'm going to drop in the chat, and you also can go there to upvote other questions that folks have already posted. So there's the link.
Avery, I also put it up on the screen too. So there's the instructions on how to add questions up on your screen as well. So you'll go to slido.com and enter that code you see on the screen.
Great, thanks, Brianna, you're a star. So yeah, let's just jump right in with the first question, which is asking the panelists to highlight the differences between working in environmental justice in rural versus urban areas, and also, I guess, highlighting differences between working with tribal communities versus other communities. So yeah, I would welcome maybe Nancy to kick it off because you have that insight into working in rural areas.
Okay, sure, great question. I think I'll start with rural. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm okay, good. So thanks for the question. Well, the difference in working in rural areas is that the kind of science background, let's just start with who you need to be as a professional. You're going to need really basic knowledge about natural resources, like how do forests function, how do trees function, hydrologies, watersheds, wildlife. So the basis of a lot of your assessment is going to be around natural resources. Second thing is the political situation in rural communities is 99% of the time incredibly conservative. So what we often find is we need to find a champion in the community. We can't be the spokesperson. We can't come in from the outside and be seen very much. So we've got to find local, on the ground, likely conservative-minded people. Situationally, the reason they're considered under the environmental justice category is that rural communities have very little capacity to do planning. They don't have the staff, they don't have the time, they don't have the money. So a lot more has got to be done for them. Let's go over to tribal. Tribal in particular, can imagine, you need a unique sensitivity to understanding the culture of the tribe. I spoke to someone yesterday and she said, I don't ask a single question until I run that question by my spokesperson at the tribal level to see even if the question is appropriate. Understandably, Native people are suspicious often of white folks coming in, and so they keep private a lot of where they're mapping of special resources. So there is an enormous amount of sensitivity and appreciation for how that culture functions, which is very different from ours. Or you can make big cultural mistakes. I'll stop there. That's a mouthful.
Thank you.
I was going to add something, if that's okay, Avery. I totally agree with what Nancy was just saying. One thing, though, I just wanted to add really quickly between the tribal considerations and environmental justice is that there is definite, I think, especially in California, when we're talking about California Native American tribes or tribes throughout the country, they have faced historic injustices, and that has to be acknowledged as we're working in this space. And definitely falls under the category of environmental justice. But one thing we also try to really recognize at our agency is that many tribes are also sovereign nations, and that there should be formal government-to-government consultation, that they do have different rights, and many of them really, that's an important thing to acknowledge. So I would just make that distinction, and something that we really try to acknowledge in our work. And also we're approaching it as a government agency, but I think that's one distinction that our tribal liaison and our team here really tries to emphasize, is just that distinction that they are a sovereign nation, and that many of them, having separate consultation procedures, and not making sure that there is a distinct recognition of the difference between environmental justice and tribal concerns and, tribal cultural resources.
I would just add to that, while there are differences, there is certainly some similarities. Nancy just mentioned, for example, about capacity. I would say that there is clear differences in capacity between urban and rural, but I'm also seeing that a lot of those same issues are also impacting urban as well. Cities, just in a different way, are struggling with the capacity to deal with the issues that happen in their communities just because of the growing migration to cities and population increase. So that is how, for example, stormwater is managed. Obviously, would be different in an urban versus rural, but cities are figuring out these growing dynamics of population and migration that I think is also impacting both rural and urban. And I will also say too that a lot of the same problems that a high level that impact rural also impacts urban. So we have both communities suffer from flooding and both communities suffer from heat waves and things of that way, just the way the context is because of different geographic locations just vary from community to community. So only being able to speak from Southeast Michigan, that is something that is growing more and more in between what is the similarities and challenges that they're having, as well as what the differences are in those, the physical makeup of those communities.
Great, thank you, everyone. Natalia, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nothing necessarily new. I see a lot of commonalities because at Catalyst, a lot of our focus is also on building a deeper democracy through climate action. So whether you're, working with the tribal nation, working with a non-federally recognized tribe, working with, a neighborhood in an urban area or a broader rural area, regardless, like our theory of change is that you need to engage with and center the people of that community, the residents, and yes, there are going to be unique challenges. Apologies for the dog in the background, if you can hear him. But there are going to be unique challenges in those different regions, and that's just that kind of geographic difference. It's just like a cultural difference or a linguistic difference. Like you just have to understand the nuance of what some of those challenges are going to be in that place. Of course, I'm going to have the bias of working with a lot more urban communities because we primarily work in the urbanized areas of Southeast Florida.
Great, thank you everyone for your input there. I think it was, really great to hear a little bit more about the broad context of working in environmental justice in different, population groups, locations. And it seems like the through line really is taking the lead from community members. Okay, so the next question, which I think will be our last question before we move into breakout rooms, is a little bit more about at like the individual career level. How do you move from having an interest in environmental justice to getting experience working on the issues and solutions of EJ?
I can start off. So I think it's awesome if you're interested in learning more about environmental justice. I would say the first thing that I would suggest is take a deeper dive, learn a little bit more. I do this every day, and I feel like there are things I learn every day from, past activists and movement leaders that are no longer with us, with, from advocates, from professionals, from communities across the nation and around the world, from, both the academic and empirical perspective, and also from like the lived and experiential perspective. There's so much to learn about challenges and avenues to achieve environmental justice. I think there's just so much to learn. And as you learn more, I think that'll help you also to have a better understanding of like what your role can be in advancing environmental justice. And I would argue in any role, really as you're working on environmental issues, in some respect for you to apply, the framework for environmental justice and really recognizing the historic and ongoing harms that create these inequities that put different communities, different groups of people, different neighborhoods at a disadvantage when it comes to self-determination, when it comes to ultimately just living a life where they can be healthy and financially secure and just thrive. And so, yeah, and then again, the procedural and distributive aspects that often get a lot more focus, and how can we ensure that communities are centered, not through the voices of other people, but directly participating in these processes, and that things are deeply democratic and managed, by the people that they're impacting, and the impacts that they experience are fair, and that there's a fair distribution of all the benefits and all of the burdens that come with all of the different ways that we need to respond to climate change. So, yeah, that's what I would.
I have an answer to that question. This is Nancy. Can you hear me okay? Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
How in our situation, the people who've wanted experience literally call me as executive director. I remember a lovely woman from Columbia University. I don't need any money. I just want the experience. I've got 15 hours a week. I want to learn about X, Y, and Z. That what you do, put me to work. And I couldn't turn it down. So volunteer yourself. Pick an organization that's doing what you like and see how you can help out. Tell them what you're interested in learning.
You don't have to whisper, sweetie. Mommy.
Just ask everyone to mute themselves, but Nancy, please continue.
I'm done.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna just add really quickly too. I mean, I think if you haven't, one of the key crux of environmental justice is really about the community that that is experiencing these injustices. And I think one of the things too is that as you're in this space and learning, like one of the things too is to be engaged in the community and listen to them, and also think about what are the ways that we can uplift the communities that we're working with and listening to what they have to say. And because a lot of times too, like we might be coming into the space not being from that community, and just always remembering that the community is the expert of their own concerns and their priorities and what's affecting them and the capacities that they have, and how we can uplift that through whatever space we're holding in the environmental field. I also think that, thinking about environmental justice, whether or not it's explicit in your role or in your job or the job you're looking for, it's about also thinking about, as environmental professionals, we're thinking about how are we protecting the environment, how are we preparing for climate change and hazards, and you can add an environmental justice and equity lens to all of that work, and making sure that even if it's not explicit, we're thinking about, are the environmental impacts disproportionately occurring in different spots, affecting different communities, and bringing in the environmental justice lens really also makes sure we're asking the question of how are historic harms and current injustices affecting those concerns. So I would just also say, it's good to also, ask these questions and not just leave it to the same people to keep asking it. And I saw a question there about being an ally, and, I think it's something that we can all bring to our roles. And so that's kind of what I wanted to add.
I will just add to that and just say that one of the things that, because I think all the others before me have kind of hit it very hard already, I'll just add that one of the things that I'm always telling young people is there is, regardless of what your passion is, regardless of what your skill is, there is a space for you in this work. And we kind of start there. Whether that is art, you have some some young people and people who are just interested in art. They love music, they love the paint, they love cultural events. There is a way to grow environmental justice awareness, and there's actually a need to further lean on those avenues of communication to even lift up the EJ movement even more. Whether it's sewing or whatever that passion is, graphic design, whatever. It is so important that people just bring themselves and their desire to see change, along with that understanding of environmental justice, that people understand that there is a space for them regardless of what their actual interest is. So that's something that we're always working on, and letting young people know that even as myself, like I think historically there's always been these barriers, especially for Black and Brown people, to think that whether it's the education they're receiving or their ability to even get into the environmental justice space in general has evolved a lot. And I think that we're coming to a space where it's so much more than just the sciences. That is a big part of it, but it is about understanding people and where they are and how their lives are being impacted. That is a big part of this work. And if you are just interested in people and people's quality of life, that you can have an impact in this space.
Wow, thank you, everyone. Those are really all inspiring answers. That's a really important, takeaways is there's a space for everybody, and the way to get into it is just like learn as much as you can, listen as much as you can, and then start doing it, whether it's volunteering or anything else, and making those connections for yourself in the context of the larger movement. Okay, so at this point, we're going to move into breakout room discussions. So each speaker is going to go into a separate breakout room, and all the audience, you guys are all able to choose at the bottom the breakout room that you would like to join. So the way you do that, you can scroll to the bottom of the agenda for instructions on where to find the breakout room button. Just click breakout room and then choose where you want to go. So we'll be there until the 55, and then we'll come back to the main room.
Sorry, Andrew. I'm happy to chat online though, offline if you about that question more.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had as exciting and vital discussions as we had with Natalia in our breakout room. I really appreciate all the questions that were asked and the insight and advice and experience that was shared by our speakers. I think at this time we're just gonna close up, and I would ask if any of the speakers have any last words they want to share, anything they want to say before we go through some housekeeping things in the professional opportunities group.
Sure, this is Nancy. Well, this was a privilege. I really appreciate that you guys invited me to have this brief conversation, but it was powerful. And thanks for the good questions in our group, and I wish all of you the best of luck in the work that you're doing.
Great, thank you, Nancy. It was a pleasure that you could come and the rest of you could come. So, okay, a lot of resources were dropped in the chat. We will follow up after this meeting with an email that will include the recording and some of the resources dropped in the chat. Additionally, our meeting next month in December is going to be a peer learning workshop, and it's going to be sort of a year-end reflection plus goal setting for members. Also, if folks are here and just got the link and are interested in ASAP membership to continue working with us, membership is pay what you can, which starts at $0, which is exciting. I would welcome anybody to, ask more questions about that. And, last thing, everybody, please vote for the Professional Opportunities and Adaptation Group to be renewed in 2022. I will be submitting our application, I think, at the end of the day today, and then voting will open up in a week or two. So yeah, vote for us. And also, I would just like to say a big thank you to Gallon, who I think is still on this call. Gallon, oh yeah, Gallon is here. Gallon is from the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, and really helped us connect with a lot of the speakers who showed up today. So thank you for the support, Gallon.
Yeah, of course. Anytime anybody on here who wants to join or reach out to our committee, the JEDI Committee is really happy to have you. And thanks to all the speakers. It's really great to learn.
Great, thank you. So we have 3 minutes left. Brianna, anything else to add? Brianna, I think you're muted if you're trying to get through. Brianna, I think you're still, okay, we'll move on. Great, well, I think that's it. Oh, again, thank you so much, everybody, for showing up, and we will follow up with an email after the call.
And speakers, can I ask you to stay on for just a minute? I have a housekeeping item for you, if at all possible. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming.